we know how that begins as you play a lot of games and you lose material. There's a lot of checkmates against you, and it doesn't feel great. And H Hart, among so many others of you here, showed such great improvement during the 10 months that we've been here together. And this is her round one game against, I believe this is a streamer, Jay Dizzy. And it's flip the board so we see it from Black's perspective. And I'm going to kind of fast forward the opening, but there's a lot of positive things I'll mention about how H Hart was playing the opening. In one example of saying, hey, this is a good step forward in your chess improvement is when you try to deliberately capture on your terms. So in other words, both sides are playing normal developing moves. And then after the move bishop d3, White is saying, hey, would you be kind enough to make this trade and help me develop my queen? And here you have to already be careful because when you help your opponent develop, you're trading on their terms, right? Your bishop disappears, her queen appears on the board. If you keep developing, sort of automatically, moves like queen d5 could become annoying. And that's a move that wouldn't be possible with the queen on d1. So just an example that when you see tension, there's always kind of the instinct to be like, well, relieve the tension. And so this is something that H Hart was just doing a great job with, is saying, I'm going to capture on my terms. Okay, so you can, if you capture me, that's no problem. I will happily recapture, open up my rook. So that's a really good sign already. I'm not going to deep dive because I'm trying to cover several games today, several stories to share. And again, developing normally creates a solid center. She plays queen c7. I like this move, putting pressure against the bishop, supporting the center. And after knight bd7, we see these trades, and then rook e8. And so you can understand White's perspective is I think maybe she got a little bit nervous to be like, look at this, 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces supporting e5, the e5 pawn break. And so she played the move knight e5 in a way to be like, okay, I better stop that. Maybe I'll play f4 and cement my knight here. And after some trades, all of a sudden White is up a pawn. Black is up a pawn. And one of the hardest things to do here is to mentally adjust that when the dust settles, to still look for contact points. So in other words, after queen takes e5, there's pressure on h2. She's worrying about knight g4, which, truth be told, the second breath is important. The first breath, like, oh, I'm in trouble. Maybe I'm going to get mated. So you start suffering from tunnel vision. And so you prevent a move that wasn't a threat, right? The knight g4 looks scary, but you could, just take the knight. And the other thing is the two sides of a piece, right? The queen is looking this way, so you feel all the pressure, and then you miss the other side of this diagonal. And so H Hart did a great job winning a pawn, winning a knight. Really good start, to the coach champ, shall we say. And I also want to say, although I'm Coach Dane by name, as I describe myself, all of you that played in coach champs, you're my coach, meaning I've never played at such a high level, meaning all this visibility, all these famous people, chess players watching, scrutinizing every move, every breath you take, all people all over the world looking at your game. So that's an experience I have not had. So I also want to use this as a disclaimer, is that when you're playing at such a visible, level, it's very easy for nerves to get into play here. And I think that happened for everybody involved. And so to Jay Dizzy's credit, there's a number of games where she was in trouble and she just kept fighting. She just kept asking questions, refused to resign. And this is one of those games. So I'm going to kind of fast forward. Black is doing well. She's won a pawn. She's won a piece. She finds her last piece, activates it, get all your pieces into the party. And everything's going very well. Rook d2, fantastic move. And rook c2. One of the hardest things when you're improving is if you turn on the engine, it's going to suggest a number of good moves here. And H Hart played one of the best moves, by the way. But when you look at an engine, there's sometimes a tendency, or game review, there's a tendency to only look at the top move. And it's like, oh, that's the move. I should have played that move. And oh, duh, it's obvious. Well, after the fact, maybe. But I think what's also important is to think about the habits, the decisions you're making. H Heart played one of the best moves in the position. I won't say what it is because I'm going to create a little bit of a survey. Feel free to throw some ideas in the chat. If you're black here, white is playing rook c2, offering a trade of rooks. What would you play in this position? And why? So suggest a move and an idea, and I'll give everyone a little bit of time to think about it and share some ideas in the chat here, and we'll talk about it. Okay. Love the engagement here. Thank you, everybody, for sharing ideas. When you're up a piece, when in doubt, if you can trade queens, that's often a very practical strategy, especially low on time. So a number of you are saying, hey, let's trade queens. Great move. Artem mentioned rook d8, a very strong player in the chat. That was H Heart's move, which is also great. And the other thing that's very interesting is, do I need to react? There's this pressure against the rook, right? But if I make a different move for white, let me play a random move. If I play the move a2, right? You're attacking my pawn, I'll just move my pawn away. Now I think a lot of us would say, hey, queen g3 looks really strong, right? Or queen b2 or whatever. But when your opponent gets in your way, they interrupt your train of thought and they say, okay, I'm going to attack you. I'm going to make things complicated. Now we kind of zoom into that square and be like, what's going on with my rook? And so H Heart played a great move, capturing on her terms. So I love this move. But interestingly enough, where there is strength, there is weakness, meaning I'm attacking your rook. That's my strength by playing rook c1 to c2. Where's the weakness? What did I leave behind? We have a loose rook. So interestingly enough, queen g3 is a really crushing idea because now we're threatening mate. And if you take my rook, I get to take both rooks by forking the king and the rook. And if white says, okay, I'm getting mated, I'm going to play queen f1 or whatever, we zoom in here, just kind of like Jay Dizzy did with h3, like looking on one side of the board. I always kind of look in the other direction and say, okay, I'm winning a rook. So that would have been a really good opportunity to find queen g3. But my point is, queen g3 is the kind of move that works in this exact position. There's a tactic here. Put a pawn on h2, we wouldn't be talking about this move. So I just want to complement the thought process that in general, even though the computer is going to be screaming play queen g3, the idea of I'm going to capture on my terms, I'm going to activate a piece, that isn't very happy staring at this pawn, and I'm going to keep control over the d file was a pragmatic choice. So after these trades, she activated her queen, put a lot of pressure on the opponent, and is just doing great. Up a piece. And now comes, I think, the hardest moment. And this is something I want us to focus on, whether we're beginners or more advanced players, is how do you win the one game? Now, easier for me to say how to win this game. I didn't play this game. I wasn't, playing in coach champs with all that visible pressure and nerves. But I think this is an important question to think about. There's a number of ways you can try to win this game, but I want to get some opinions in the chat. Like, how would you try to win this game as white or as black? Excuse me. What's your opinion? Give everyone a little bit of time. Cagaletta, the nerves, heartbreaking. Yeah, I hear you, but you made it through, and you're stronger for that experience. And thank you for making it to the class, by the way. Great to see you. Okay, so a lot of people, I'm seeing queenside passers. So we have what we call a 3 versus 2 pawn majority on the queen side. The first thing you want to do is tie down your opponent's pieces. Tie down your opponent's pieces. And so the move knight f4 is excellent. This is a move that joins the queen and attacking the g2 pawn. So if the queen ever moves away, we have mate. And so sometimes Mark Dorowiecki in his Endgame manual use this concept, the principle of two weaknesses. In order to win a chess game, you need two weaknesses. Okay, you're up a piece, that helps, but one weakness you're attacking is g2. It's a big weakness, and if the queen ever moves away, it's mate. And so once you do that, you've basically frozen the king and the queen together here around the g2 pawn. And so once that happens, you can almost just kind of cut this side of the board out of your mind and say, hey, I can go c5, b5, c4, and slowly push the pawn up the board. And as Cagaletta says, converting a one pawn advantage at 800 is tricky. I struggle at 1600. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. All of these pieces of advice I'm giving, easy to say, a different thing to practice. But my point is, if you're under pressure, you want to simplify your life. How do you do that? Is take your opponent's powerful piece and immobilize it. Ideally trade it. But by playing this move, basically the strategy now is going to be like, let's say a4, you play b5. And although you only have one defender, that's all you need, because after takes and takes, the queen can never take, because this would be checkmate. So the problem for white is that you're tied down to one weakness. You're on one side of the world, and on the other side of the world are these pawns, and there's no stopping them, right? And so that's how you might be able to win a game like this. If you have time to reflect, if you're not maybe under as much pressure as one was in this tournament. But what happened was a number of adventures continued here. And what's going to happen in a blitz scramble? Chaos. We're going to make mistakes. It looks like checkmate was on the board, and unfortunately the knight falls, and the game gets crazy with little time on the board. And the other big thing here is H. Hart was able to resurface. Things were suddenly turned against her. She found queen e5 and queen d4. And the thing to always remember is, if you can keep a king sort of stuck in a box, like this perpetual box, where you can just keep checking the king, there's always an opportunity for perpetual check. And what I mean by a box is, this king is not going to get out of this box. If you go here, sorry, if you go to say f1, queen d1, king goes here, check. You try to run away, I keep following you. And so there was no way to actually escape. There was a perpetual, easier said than done. And at the end of the day, unfortunately, for H. Hart, that didn't quite work out. She was so close. She found all the right checks, needs one more check to save the day. And unfortunately, after f5, the game turns against her. And after the pawn promotes, she tries to keep it complicated with check, throws in another check. And then here comes the last question for this game. I know we're looking at it upside down. Maybe let me flip the board. How does white get out of this perpetual check? Give me like a 2-move plan. How do you get out of this perpetual check? Easier said than done, right? If you play king f1, you're moving closer to the queen. So then after queen d1, the game stays kind of complicated. Interestingly enough, king h1 or king h2 works. By playing king h2, as Jay Dizzy did in the game, the idea is there's only one, well, technically, I guess you could play queen d6, check, now that I'm looking at it again. But if you play queen e5, as was played in the game, there's king h1, right? And if you play king h1, there's still this check, right? And the game stays suddenly complicated, right? So how do we avoid all these checks? How do we work this out under pressure after queen d4? King h2, queen d6 check. I hit a little bit of a wall, right? This is where I was really impressed when I looked at this. So my point is, we're looking at a game. You might say, "Oh, this is the under 800." You know, it's maybe these games are pretty basic, but it's like there's actually even here an interesting moment. I don't know if this was discussed by the commentators, but it turns out this is really tricky. And who would predict the answer is you play Queen G2? Like what? National Master suggesting illegal moves that you somehow float through these pawns? This is imagination in chess. All you need to do is put an end to the checks. And so notice it wasn't so easy. When you're moving your king around, you still have to keep dealing with these annoying checks. Far from obvious how to get out of these checks. E5. Takes. F4. G3. Check. And there's the harmony between the queens. Queen G2. I was amazed to see this. I had no idea. Like, I have to admit, if I'm playing this in a blitz game, I'm probably not finding this. Like if I'm under like I have like 10 seconds or something, like I just play, okay, get out of the checks. And just incredible though about imagination in chess. Figure out what's not working first, right? I'm not finding my way out of these checks. How do I end the checks? Here, 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 and open the diagonal. Very rare. I've never seen a pattern like this. So again, just to show you the beauty of chess, whether you're under 800 or under 2,800, like we all are, every chess game is an opportunity to learn and to grow. And so we're going to hear a little bit more from H Hart later, but definitely a heartbreaking game. On the surface, feels very bad to lose such a tough game, but also what a wonderful opportunity for growth, right? She played a wonderful game, and what makes chess so difficult is you can play 90% of the game extremely well, and you have a couple of mistakes that go against you, and then at the end of the day you lose, and there's nothing to show for it on the chess scoreboard. And so more on that later, but a good example of fighting spirit for both sides. I want to look at a game played by the tournament winner in the under 800 section, Nabolini. And this is something that I think is really important, is when you learn different tactical motifs, don't blindly memorize them. Like a really popular training method is the woodpecker method. And that helped an international master on his way to grandmaster, help him get that extra tactical sharpness. And his concept was to look at the same positions over and over and over, like cycles of tactics. And there's definitely value in like, okay, I see the tactic, I see the pattern, and it definitely makes sense. But one thing that you have to also balance from just like rote memorization and like repetition of patterns is, why do these ideas work? Let me give you an example. This didn't happen in the game, but I just want to paint a picture of why it's important to understand the ideas behind a tactic. Um, by the way, I don't have this game with me, but there's a case where Frank, I think, in the under 1600 section, did a puzzle rush tactic where he like sacked a piece and he thought he had a back rank mate, but then he missed that the bishop could block and give the king an escape square. So for those of you that want to look up that article, you can see a game where Frank thought he had a forced win, and it was a forced loss because he played a puzzle rush tactic that didn't quite work. Remember that when you're studying tactics, there's a tactic defined in this position, right? So it's going to work out if it's a good puzzle in that particular position, but not always. So let me show you a pattern that's very important to know. If you play the black side of the Ruy Lopez, this is a good line to also know, is you take with the D pawn. And the idea is if the knight takes the pawn, it's like, oh, did you lose a pawn? Nope, the pawn and the knight are loose, unprotected. So here we have a double attack. Queen d4 attacks the knight and the pawn. So going back, this means that the bishop is not winning a pawn, but you could make this trade called the exchange variation of the Ruy Lopez, where you give up your bishop in exchange for doubling black's pawns here on the c file. After castles, there's this move bishop g4. And after the move h3, I don't know if we have any fishing enthusiasts in the audience, but here we have the fishing pole trap, h5. It's a really beautiful move. And the idea is you don't have to move your bishop. You can play queen f6 and you can pile up the pressure on the knight. And you might wonder, well, why? Why is that possible? Because if you take, now I get to take back and I threaten your knight. The other thing I'm doing, why I pushed that pawn, was to awaken my rook on the h file. After knight h2, I'm attacking your pawn, because otherwise I'm going to take your knight, right? And now I play queen h4. This is the fishing pole tactic. And that basically, if you play f3, so if you take my pawn, I checkmate you. If you take this pawn, I checkmate you. And if you play f3, I could take the knight with check, but always remember to seal the door, close the door. Play f3, or g3, excuse me, in response to f3, shutting out the king's escape, and now we can take that knight. So this is called the fishing pole tactic. So I showed you a tactic where it works. So just to remember the concept, after h3, the main idea is h5. And the reason it works is because white has no development other than the knight and the castled king. And that when you take me, if you take the bishop, now I open up the H file, I'm going to gain access to H4. And if you don't move your knight, I take you. That's the fishing pole tactic. Why am I showing it to you? Because in this game with Nabolini, I'll fast forward the opening. Look at that H4, very scary looking London system. H6, what does white play here? Knight G5. And notice this is an example where if the pawn is on H4, then maybe there's some scary fishing pole idea, right? Because it would open up the H file for the rook, but there's a very slight but key difference. The H pawn was a little overly ambitious and is no longer guarding the knight. So put yourself in black shoes here. You're under a little bit of pressure. How do you decide whether you should take the knight? And what would your follow-up be? Seeing a lot of good terms, umbrella, intermezzo. Yeah, Liberal made a comment about woodpecker method. Yeah, it's not all about memorization, but I will make a point that when you see a position enough times, you start making visualization and calculation shortcuts because you already know the pattern. So that's always like a little bit of a complicated nuance to that story. But yeah, overall, definitely some good material there. Okay, so I'm seeing intermezzo. I saw umbrella. What do these terms mean? So taking the knight with the pawn is great. And if the move h6 is played, I think when somebody said umbrella, I wonder if they meant g6 here, meaning that they keep the king sheltered. That might be what they meant. But the big point is, when your opponent is offering a sacrifice, ask yourself, well, what's the follow-up if I just trade their pieces off? I see there Lagondo with e5, good move thinking as well. But if I take you and you take back, now you can play knight h7. And so the big point is that I've already won a piece, your knight for a pawn, and now I'm revealing the knight, bishop, and queen, all attacking the bishop there. And so this is a big problem, for white. And so the big theme I'll give you is that it's scary to open up your king. It's the kind of position where like, I don't know if I should do it or not. But if you don't see a direct refutation, if you don't see, why the sky is falling, go for it. You might be wrong and then you'll learn something. But if you don't see why you're losing and you don't take the piece, then we're kind of haunted by ghosts, right? And so here black could have captured and would have went on to, I think, win the game fairly quickly by finding that tricky move, knight h7. So in the game, he played h6. He wasn't sure about it, and he played knight h7. And so just an example where if you see a pattern like, oh yeah, I kind of remember there's some sacrifice on g5, and if I take it, I lose, always push yourself to be like, is this the same position? What's the difference? And if you go back to that fishing pole example that I gave a moment ago, the big difference is when you take, I'm opening up a monster, this rook on the H file, and there's nothing I can do about it. Whereas if we look at the game by taking the knight here, thankfully there's a pawn in the way. And there's so no easy way for the rook to get into the action. And who's going to attack your knight, right? If the bishop does, you move back and you offer a trade. So just an example of, looking at positions by studying tactics, and make sure you kind of give yourself the time to like understand the mechanics of the tactic and why does it work in one position, because it very well might not work in another. Speaking of, I said, so Nabolini ended up winning this game. He ended up winning the under 800 section. And I wanted to just really quickly finish a story that you don't see in the article is, so H Hart played that great game we looked at round one. She unfortunately lost. She lost her second game, and then she drew her third. And I think that's so important to kind of reflect on what happened after that. She was able to resurface and ended up winning her last two games. And so I just wanted to kind of give her that shout out that the only person that ended up defeating the winner of the tournament was H Hart after starting off with 0 wins, two losses and a draw. And she, as black, went back to doing her thing, just playing solidly, put the opponent under some pressure, and she ended up with a very instructive moment. Bishop g5. If you listen to my advice, you might blunder a piece here. What I mean is that when I give lessons, I always like to talk about maintaining tension. This is something that I've mentioned a lot, and H Hart said, okay, I hear you. She's done a great job with trying to capture on her terms, and her opponent says, I'm going to do the same thing. Rather than capturing and allowing you to activate your queen, since all the drama is here, these two squares, f4 and g5, I'm going to support my bishop like so. And so it's very easy to look at the front side of the alignment and miss the back door. And so H Hart ended up finding this tactic and ended up winning a piece. So just a good reminder that when you're looking at one direction of tension, the bishop is attacking its rival, the bishop is attacking in this direction. Don't forget about the X-ray potential, right? So all of a sudden, H Hart won a piece, went on to win a wonderful game. So this is something I want to emphasize, is that you might not win the tournament. You might not have your story told in the bright lights. But what are the things you can take from this experience? And I think this is a good example where we've spent some time deep diving, a couple of games played in the under 800 section, and there's so much depth, there's so much beauty to the game. And, what can you take from this experience? And I was just really impressed by how H Hart resurfaced after 3 difficult games and ended up winning 2 games at the end and also beating the tournament leader. So big shout out to her. Now I'm going to jump to a couple other sections. Ideally, I'd love to cover a lot more games, but there's only so much time. SM, this is for you. I also want to really thank everyone who is in our Improvers Club. I'm most active in Ask Coach, Ask Community Forum. Please reach out there. Please continue to share your experience, ask questions, support one another. And because people are doing this, I'm able to tell the story. Is SM, one of the participants, did a great job fighting in a very difficult tournament. And the tournament didn't go his way. He lost most of his games. And he said, I feel like I let my coach down and let the community down. And there was such a warm, positive response he received. Like, no, not at all. He didn't let anyone down. And we're so happy, that you're part of the club. And at the end of the day, it's like, look, some people are going to win the tournaments. There's going to be the stories where other people don't have good tournaments, right? And everywhere in between. And what I think I want to share a game that at the end of the day, SM ended up winning this game, and it was a really instructive game. So although there was a lot of dark storm clouds from the experience of the game of the tournament, here you are today joining us in the class. Thank you for making it, and let's take that experience and let's all grow and learn together. And this was a great game you played. So although maybe at the end of the day the results didn't feel great, this was a game you can really be proud of. And I think we have a couple interesting examples that people are going to enjoy. So I'm going to fast forward to a moment here. So SM has white, and he played queen f3. He put his opponent under some pressure. And he played e4. And this is an example where you can get really sucked into tunnel vision. He played e4. He put the opponent under pressure. And I said, oh, no, there's two attackers, the pawn and the x-ray, queen attacking. So he brought his queen over to defend. And all of a sudden, boom. So remember this idea, pawns open windows for pieces. When you find yourself, and by you, I mean all of us, every player, we zoom in to where the crisis is. This is where the main theater of action is with these pawns. You basically look at two squares and you miss the other 62. It happens to all of us. And so this was an example where Black should have captured, but after this, SM captured the knight, and we're going to see how he continued to play a great game. But for those of you in the audience, and myself included, after taking the pawn, I wondered, how good is White's position? What are some thoughts here? What do you think's going on? What do you think White should do? And how do you feel about White's position? Okay, so some people are questioning, like the king's not so healthy, it's still in the middle. Don't love the light square weaknesses, says Lugando, because of G3 and the queen slicing through the light squares. Good point. And I ask a question at a weird moment. What I mean by that is, if you're playing this game, if SM's opponent captured in a tournament game, like a blitz game, be very easy to immediately capture, right? Because you don't want to be down a pawn. But the interesting point is SM's idea of creating activity down this diagonal is brilliant. It's a really good idea. And after taking, this is another example. I have a tip, by the way, for those of you that play online and you play with a mouse. I recommend take your hand off the mouse. Create your favorite thinking pose, however you want to do it. If assuming you're not playing bullet, I guess, or blitz. But if you're playing a rapid game, I highly recommend keep your hand off of the mouse. And that way, when a move like DE4 occurs, pawn takes pawn, you're not instantly reacting to taking the pawn. It's something I've been working on myself, so that each time I touch the mouse, I'm making a deliberate effort, just like touching a piece physically and making it over the board. So by doing that, it's a reminder of, do I need to react? What SM has weak light squares, as Lugando said. The king is stuck in the middle. I think Javier in chat mentioned that. But do I need to take that pawn? By finding the move queen h5, White is significantly better here, despite all the weaknesses. And why is White significantly better? Because if you move the knight away, look out for f7 falling. And all of a sudden, if you don't move the knight, I'm removing the guard, and there's a big problem here. So this is kind of an amazing moment. And this is SM or anyone else. Let's say in this game you took the pawn. Let's say you went on to lose this game, SM, which you didn't. You won a great game. How would that feel? This would be an example where we'd miss this incredible learning opportunity due to the weight of the loss and the frustration. And it's so important to be able to point this stuff out because these are lessons you got to capture in a bottle before they disappear, right? So anyway, after e4, Black didn't do that. and we get to this position, king d8. So SM plays a good move, knight d2. And another way to think tactically is pieces that are in forking distance of a knight. Notice that the king, queen, and rook are all in forking distance of a knight. Unfortunately, our queen is standing in the way. If only two pieces could share the same square, right? So here you could play the move queen g7, followed by knight f7. That's a pretty cool tactic. But this is another example of how to win the one game. So I'm going to fast forward. SM's playing very well, trades queens, he castles. A lot of action occurs. So I'm just showing you it in real time as I'm just kind of blitzing through the moves to get us to the next critical moment. Okay, here. What would you play as white? I think there's a couple of good moves. Well, let me just say what he played. He played rook b6 first. I think it's a great move, activates the rook. Now let me ask, what would you play next as white? Focusing on how to win the one game. Lugando said his first thought is rook b1. That's kind of weird. Why do you think that, Lugando? I'm just teasing him. He's saying rook g to b1. Piling up the pressure against b7. Absolutely correct. Is a good way. And that's what I probably would have played. But some of you said something else, and that's exactly what SM played. He played rook e1. He came up with a really clever idea to attack this way. So now attacking across the sixth rank, he's attacking the bishop. And if I play rook b1, this is also a very solid move where you're just going to win a pawn. But he played this way. And in the game, the way that SM won is he simply moved the rook here. He attacked a weakness, and he centralized his knight. Really cool maneuver, SM, knight d2 to e4. So he went on to win a nice game. This is the highlight of his tournament for sure. But I want to show a concept here that's far from obvious. This is where we're getting a little bit deeper into the tactical territory. And I want to compare it to this moment. After the move king d8, it's clear for us to highlight all of these squares are in forking distance, right? So when I suggest queen g7, we can say, okay, yeah, that all makes sense. I'm attacking a rook while I'm clearing the f7 square for the knight. That way I'm threatening a fork, and you can't move everything, okay? So going back to the game, fast forward, SMU provided a lesson for me by analyzing this game. And after this position was brought forth, it's not, I don't think anyone's first impression is clearly what white needs to do is play knight d7 and fork the king and the rook. Sounds like a weird and nonsensical statement. But notice the king and the rook that are both on light squares are tactically glued to this bishop. If I play knight e5 check immediately, the bishop would capture. So incredibly, there's a wonderful tactic here where you can create a black hole of captures, get the king here to f6, and deliver a fork. So in the other example where I had king, queen, rook, all the pieces, all the actors were on stage where they needed to stand, right? Here, we're going to do an interesting dance. Rook takes bishop, check. I see some of you are already talking about that. Great job. We attract the rook here, and now you play knight e5. Not possible one move ago. I mean, you could play it, but you get captured. So you remove the guard, giving up a little bit of material, by the way, right? I have a knight and a rook versus two rooks, but look at that concept of being glued to the dark squares, glued to f6. So wherever the king moves, now you take. And after takes the rook, knight d7, fork. King moves away, and you take the rook. Very, very complicated example of how to simplify the game. I have to say SM played a very pragmatic way that's completely winning. So definitely, I like how he did it. But it's something that I learned from analyzing this game was there's a really cool way to liquidate into a completely winning ending. And I thought, hey, what a cool lesson to compare um, this moment where you see all the actors on stage where you want them to stand, and it takes one move to just open up the forking sunshine here on F7, and compare it to a far more complicated example where here the square F6 is connected to the square B8, connection points tactically. And if I could float my knight here, there's a fork. So for those of you, that have done a lot of these advanced tactics and the woodpecker method, this is kind of speaking maybe your language here to find some of these cool ideas. Now, the last thing I want to share, and I think I'm going to do a part 2. I mean, let me know in the Improvers Club for next month. I'll be doing a class. I wanted to look at like 10 games, not possible, but I do want to look at one last game for today. And then perhaps we can do a part 2 if people are really interested in seeing some of these games. I want to look at a game played between Lugando and the Vitom, who ended up winning the tournament. I didn't get to watch the tournament live, unfortunately, but while I was working, sometimes the video feed would pop up, and I saw one game Lugando. You have to remind me. I think it was like a Caro-Kann where you played like this E6 move. It's like a really sweet move. If you can remind me, maybe share the game in the Improvers Club. That's a game I want to cover as well. Lugando was on fire. He defeated the highest rated player round 1, I think, and did excellent. I think won his first 2 games and then ran into some trouble. And so here he runs into the person who ends up winning the tournament. And so I think Lugando is another person that I think, and all of you here that were in Coach Champs, so many of you have such great stories to share. But Lugando, I saw that E6 and I was like, wow, this guy's on fire, and was really excited for you. I want to finish today regarding opening anxiety. It's something I suffer from. I don't know if anyone else has this experience, but I always feel like I am never sufficiently prepared in the opening. I feel that the next tournament I'm going to play in, I always freak out and I don't know any of my openings and I'm in trouble and I'm going to get crushed. And rarely is it the case that I do get crushed. And even if something really bad happens in the opening, chess is a game of many opportunities. So if you're not playing Magnus tomorrow, if you blunder in the opening, you're generally going to have 1, 2, 3, or several more chances. And this is an interesting game where the person who won the under 2000, right, Vitom, his openings did not go well for him in general. I didn't look at all of his games, but a lot of his games looked like he was in trouble. And he even said he went out of his way to just play really fast and to complicate things. Lugando's openings were awesome, at least the 2 openings I saw. And he had some wonderful games. And this is one of them. After D6, white should think about, taking on D4, or black should. Vitom played this and was already in trouble. D takes E5, D takes E5, and imagine Vitom's shock when Lugando uncorked this brilliant move. Look at it from black's perspective. I can't take the bishop because I blunder my queen. Therefore, Vitom played king E7 quite quickly. Now, you heard me say something. I can't play this. When you deal with shock or surprise, it's so important that when you find yourself hand waving, okay, stupid, I can't believe I missed this move, I can't take the bishop, and he blitzes out this move, it's really important to settle the tactic. What do I mean by that? If you take the bishop here, white is doing great, by the way. But if you take that bishop, this is where you can stop in midair and say, I lose my queen, it's the end of the world. However, wait a minute, that queen is aligned with the rook. So the only reason I can't win the queen is because my bishop is in the way. So here you can find bishop b4 check. And all of a sudden, I'm threatening to win the queen back, and you sacrificed a piece. Now, of course, in the game, Lugando would play queen d2 and block on his terms. Or maybe bishop d2. What do you think, Lugando? What would you play? Yeah, queen d2, exactly. You return the queen and the game continues. Lugando's up a pawn, he's doing well, but the game continues. So my point is, where Vitom's strength and weakness kind of met is he moved really fast, but he didn't panic. He didn't like freak out and be like, okay, the game's over. So here he's like, okay, whatever, I'll play this move and I'll keep fighting. But it's interesting to note that when you're surprised, the blinders come on and the tunnel vision occurs. And that's where I remind you, if you're not playing a bullet game, keep your hand off the mouse. You can even have the hand really close to the mouse. But just like when you get shocked here, there's no like reaction of the mouse when you're playing online. You can think for a minute and be like, well, how bad is that? Settle the tactic. Look at that idea. As terrible as it feels, black's very much in the game after that. So after this, king e7 was played, Lugando captured. And this is a game, you hear me say it all the time, the powerful question, do I need to react? This whole game, there's like tons of these examples. And it was a roller coaster of a game. A fork is threatened on c2, Lugando castles. Great job by him, by the way, not like saying, I need to guard a pawn and lose my right to castle. He just goes with the flow. He's like, okay, fine. I'm going to castle. I have a really good development lead here with my king being safe. I've got pressure on this pawn. You take my pawn, no problem. Go ahead. And after the move, bishop f5, Lugando, does he freak out about the knight, bishop, and rook being aligned? He takes the pawn. Yeah, Milos, thanks. I'm glad you like that advice. Yeah, it's something I'm working on myself. The hand off the mouse. You don't hear it too often, and I haven't practiced it too often, but I do think it's something that's very helpful. Thanks for the feedback. So Lugando takes, and his opponent plays rook to g8 because why? He was threatening a fork. So look at what Lugando did. He did many really great things in this game, and this is one of those moments. The bishop is attacking the rook through an X-ray. The knight moves. The rook's going to be in jeopardy. What does Lugando do? He doesn't panic. He says, hey, you have weaknesses too, my friend. Knight e5. Very practical move. And after rook g8, Lugando played g4. And now comes an important question. Put yourself in Lugando's shoes after knight a3. Boom. Do I need to react? What should white play here? Okay, Galeta, 2 pieces for the rook is sweet. So when you look at it as you're losing material, we can kind of panic and play like rook a1 or something. But Lugando's powerful question, do I need to react? No. I win a bishop and a knight for my rook. And Lugando completely, has turned the tables on his opponent. The game was complicated. Now is doing incredibly well. And he was very close to winning this game. So it's, again, the story is Vitom wins, and credit to Vitom, by the way. Just he's incredible performance. And in the Improvers Club, he left, feedback of like how his tournament went. And it's like, what am I doing next? I'm doing 1,001 club tactics for 1,001 tactics for club players. Like he's already got a study list and he's moving forward. Like he's already, all right, got to move forward. Here's the next thing I'm going to be working on. So he's not like, chilling and, oh, I won the under 2000 and now I'm going to challenge Magnus tomorrow. He's looking forward. So I was really happy to see his attitude. And this game was a bit of a heartbreaker for Lugando because I really liked how he played it. And unfortunately, they get into these complications and you have to be a very strong player, I think, to make the blunder Lugando did. And it goes back to that example with H-Heart, where we talked about Queen G3 being a great move in a particular position. Remember my idea of do I need to react? Like all the way back to knight e5. It's our last moment we'll look at together. Right here. How easy would it be to panic? Lugando, I have to admit, the first move that would come to my mind is like some reactionary, like knight h4, attack the bishop, and then get into some real bad news. And so credit to you that you're like, hey, it's okay. My rook's protected by the knight. I don't need to react. I'm going to take here. Black also said, do I need to react? And came up with this really interesting move. And so it's like a battle of, do I need to react? Right. And at the very end, we get to this moment where Logando's like, do I need to react? If I take you, there's a fork. And so he's like, okay, I don't need to react. You need to react, buddy. F4. And this is why I have to give Vitam a lot of credit. He's showed tremendous fighting spirit. After F4, he takes. Just a brilliant move. Because the point is yeah, you get to take my rook. If you push, look out for the knight. But by taking, you're outside of the knight circle, no way to catch it. And he went on to win the game. Very cold-blooded move, Artem. How do you deal with these emotions? Would asking this question in the moment help? Luganda says, I'm not the right person to ask. I lost this game. I actually disagree, Luganda. You're the perfect person to ask, because the question is like, how do you deal with like some really difficult problem? The answer is you don't. You experience it, you suffer, and you reflect. In other words, I'm a national master, not because I've played a lot of brilliant games. I've had a fair share of good games, but I'm a national master because I've lost more games than all of you in this class combined, not just because I'm so old, but because that's how you get better. You have these games, right? And that's why I wanted to showcase SM, who on the surface had a bad tournament and felt he let people down. Well, I hope you feel completely different about that from the heartwarming responses you received in the club, but also the discussion today. Rather than letting people down, you did the opposite. You showed a great way to win a game. I was able to show some interesting tactics through your chess. And I hope that's the final message that I can deliver today, is that I'm a national master through battle scars, through walking the rocky road to chess improvement, and that I'm still trying to improve as well. And so whether you're in the under 800, the under 2000, or like all of us, the under 2800 section, I hope you gain something from our discussion, not just the lessons on the board, but the lessons off the board. Dealing with emotions, the last thing I'll say, I'm no expert on it, but I will say, King Arthur, about how do you deal with emotions is, well, again, do you prevent yourself as Black here from cursing yourself after bishop f7? Like your immediate reaction, can you control that? I don't think so. I don't think you can like easily control the reaction to bishop f7, meaning your thoughts. Like you see this move, like, oh, life is great. I'm so happy that I blundered this tactic. Like no one's reacting in some chill, calm manner. Maybe you're a statue externally, but how are you feeling inside when you're processing a shock, right? It's the next moment. So my argument is, how do you deal with those emotions? Well, it depends on the person, depends on your own experience. But in my experience, watch the wave crash on shore. When bishop f7 happens, boom, the wave of emotion is going to cover you. There's no avoiding it. But what you do next, maybe you can start controlling a bit more, right? How do I react? Check the claim. Is it true that I'm losing a queen? It looks that way, but it turns out you're not. Had you found this move, it would have been a different story in the opening. But what did he do after that? To his credit, his interpretation was, I don't have time to figure this all out. It's merely a flesh wound. It's merely a pawn. I'll play here and keep fighting. So whether you find the best move or you find Vitam's move, the attitude is the same. How do I move forward? Is this the end of the world? Just like H. Hart. How did she recover from 2 losses? The first game was brilliant. She should have won that game by the quality of play, was completely dominating the game, fell apart at the end, lost a second game, had a draw, a very tough draw. How did she recover, right? And also, how about SM? Like he didn't recover during the tournament, right? He didn't have a big turnaround and a lot of positives, but he had one wonderful game that I found, but also here he is today in the class. sharing his experience, learning together. And that, I think, is the big lesson, is keep moving, keep momentum with your chess. Don't allow success or perceived failure to stop you. This is, as I say this all the time, but it's my favorite quote. You know how intense, like the candidates tournament, playing for the world title. And so there's all this preparation, and grandmasters are hiring an army of grandmasters with computers that fill the entire room looking for new opening novelties. And there's all this intense preparation. And so Alexander Grischuk, grandmaster's playing this tournament and has all this crazy opening theory, and the game gets wild, and he gets interviewed after, and like, Sasha, Alexander Grischuk, how long did you prepare for this tournament? How long did you prepare for this game? How deep was your prep? And he just pauses, and how long did I prepare? My whole life, I suppose. Just a brilliant quote. Meaning, my whole life is my preparation. Coach Champs is preparation. This class is preparation. Yeah. And so thank you, everybody. There was a number of other games I wanted to share. We're already hitting an hour. Thank you so much for hanging out with me for an hour looking at chess. If there's enough interest, I think I will definitely look at some more Coach Champs next month in our improvers class. If I look at my calendar just real quickly, I have the 21st written down, November 21st at the same time. That may change, so don't look at that as a concrete date, but that is the most likely date we'll meet next month. And one other thing, please go to our improvers club, Ask Coach, Ask Community. I'm very active there, except next month or next week. I'm actually going to be going to the staff meetup. Chess.com has an annual meetup, and we'll all be meeting in Cancun next week. So I will be inactive in the improvers club, but I will be there very much in spirit. And then the following week I'll be engaged again. So anyway, thank you, everybody. Good morning, afternoon, evening to all of you. Thank you so much for making it. And I'll look forward to seeing you in the Improvers Club, Ask Coach, Ask a Community Forum specifically. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.